Muscatine Community School District Monday, March 11th board meeting. Madam Secretary, would you take roll for us and determine a quorum?
Sure. Director DeBeat?
Here.
Drawbaugh?
Here.
Finn?
Here.
Mather?
Here.
McCarter? Neighbor?
Here.
Wildermuth? A quorum is present.
Thank you. If you would all stand, we will recite the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to welcome all of our visitors this evening, as well as our media representatives. We appreciate you joining us. Our next agenda item is the Citizen Speaks portion of the agenda. If there's anyone in the audience that would like to address the board, this is your time to do that. We ask that you step to the podium, state your name and address for the record. Please understand that per our board policy, we're not able to respond to comments during Citizen Speak, but would certainly appreciate hearing what you have to say. And it's exciting when there's someone here that is going to join us for Citizen Speaks.
Hello, I'm Daphne Donald. I live at 1559 Washington Street here in Muscatine.
I'm Becky Easerhout. I live at 16219 H Avenue in Muscatine.
And we're going to talk tonight. We brought a little flyer for everybody. Hopefully you got one. It's actually a registration form for the Race for the Schools. This is the 7th year that we are having the Race for the Schools. We have a 5K and a 1 mile. And last year we started timing the 1 mile because the PE teachers really appreciated that, got the kids ready for a PE class.
Right.
Something that we do, we have a couple things. We brought a poster. This year we did a poster contest. Last year we had a high school student that created the poster. This year the poster contest winner was a 5th grader from Franklin School. So this is his actual original poster. We're going to get it made into posters that will be distributed around town, and each of the schools will get one, so we're kind of excited about that. His name's Jonathan Shelladay, and he's a 5th grader at Franklin. We have 2 new things this year. We have Bash and Bounce houses. We have 2 that are going to be at the start-finish line, and one of the main reasons we're doing that, we have a lot of awards that we do for the race, and we want people to stay for the awards ceremony, so that's kind of to give people something to do while they're waiting. It takes a few minutes to tally, the different times. The 1 mile is first at 8 o'clock. That's going to be timed. The 5K is at 8:30. The proceeds, hopefully most of you know, they do support our wellness programs in the schools and our PE programs.
PE teachers. And I know the PE teachers really appreciate that. That gives us just a little extra to buy some things that we might not otherwise have funding for. So that's really appreciated.
Yeah, they've gotten some fun things. One of the things they bought at the high school were Rogue bands. I don't even know what those were, but apparently those are really important at the high school. And different things like that, yeah, the PE programs use.
The 7th grade PE teachers take their kids ice skating. They've done that with the proceeds. Floor hockey class sets. Class sets of things are really expensive, so this, again, comes in really handy.
So we do encourage all the kids to go. We've really discounted the prices so that the 5K is only, the 1 mile is only $5, and the 10K is only $10 for the kids. And every student that registers gets a water bottle. This is last year's model, and they will have some little goodies in there. And so we're hoping that the kids will participate. The other thing, I know you're all probably wondering, how can I help? What can I do? So that's why I did this. Yeah, you can make cookies.
Yes.
There's a registration form. You can register. You can become a sponsor. You can. We have a business challenge for the most employees from a certain business. So if you have a business that you're affiliated with that you want to encourage your coworkers to attend, and then we have. Arranged with Booney's, one of our sponsors, Booney on the Avenue. We're having a fundraiser night there on April 29th, which is the Monday before the race. And then Becky's actually in charge of the volunteers.
Yes, and the more volunteers, the better. I don't know if you are involved with road races at all. It takes a lot of volunteers just to pull off a 5K. So definitely, if you want to volunteer, that's awesome. Yep, just.
And there's a link at the bottom of your, on the back of your sheet. It's Sign Up Genius, so it's really easy to go to
Yeah.
and sign up if you're interested in
Yep, you can
volunteering.
just go right to Sign Up Genius, pick whatever, if you want to bake cookies,
Yeah.
or if you want to be on the course and just cheer people on. If you want to help with anything, you just go to there, click what you want to do, and then it will remind you a few days ahead of time. So it's a cool thing, easy to do.
We do have our sponsors listed, the sponsors that we have, we're continually taking them in, but we do offer scholarships, so if there's kids that want to participate, we certainly have money available to do that through the sponsorship, so we really appreciate that, everyone that sponsors the race, so. All right, did we say it was May 4th?
May 4th, mark your
First-
calendars.
First Saturday in May. All right, thank you.
Daphne and Becky, thank you so much. If for our viewers that are watching at home, can they find this electronically?
There's a link on our school district page, getmeregistered.com, and then each of the schools has this registration form. They're at the school board office.
Okay. So they're at each school, they're at the school board office. If I go on to the district webpage, I'll find a link that'll take me
I
there.
think you have to it's like in the announcements, I believe, the actual, and also on our
Okay.
Facebook page, I believe.
Okay, perfect. So there are lots of places where I can find it if I don't have the hard copy. May 4th, you're looking for runners. You could also stand lots of volunteers. Do you offer silver cord hours for students who might volunteer?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Do we have anyone else that would like to speak for Citizen Speaks? All right, hearing none, we will move on to our student council update.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tess Rombuler, I'm Student Council President. Tom?
And I'm Tom Rainier. I make the art for Stuco typically.
As you may know, last week we held our 10th annual Senior Survivor competition. So 6 teams of seniors, a boy and a girl, competed all throughout the week. They stayed at the high school. They did challenges to fundraise for each of their charities. In total, the survivors raised $9,639 for local and global charities. The teams and the amounts are as follows. 6th place was Mateo Rangel and Danny Correas. They fundraised for World Wildlife, and that was $529. 5th place was Tanner Niehaus and Kaylee Reynolds. They made $1,433. Carson Orr, Kendra Eller raised $1,482. Carson Bordy and Callie Kellett raised $2,754. And Tony Nitzel, Julia Moravik raised $1,573. And the winners were Veda Fridley and Will Zillig, and they raised $1,869.
I'm not professional. I don't have notes. I just have my phone. So additionally, on the 23rd of February, we held our annual Winter Thaw Dance, and we were able to raise over $2,000 to help fund prom this year, once again at the Merrill.
And just a quick update, next month in April, we're holding our first annual dance marathon, and all of the proceeds for that will go to the Iowa Children's Hospital. And there's going to be lots more information at the next meeting, but that's all we have for you right now.
Does anyone have any questions for Tess or Tom before we let them slip away?
How do you sign up for the dance marathon? Because I know Mr. McGrory might be really interested.
That is still in the works, but I promise I will let you know as soon
Okay,
as I
that
find
would
out.
be great.
Well, congratulations to Student Council and another successful year of Senior Survivor. You all do a lot of amazing events all year long, but I know that Senior Survivor is always huge. And while these students are fundraising and doing challenges and sleeping weird hours, they still have to go to school too, right?
Yes.
Successfully go to school.
Successfully. Yeah, they did a really good job this year.
So, which makes for a long week. So, $9,639 between 12 individuals is quite amazing. So.
Yeah. Yep, we're very proud of them.
You should be. Well, thank you for your work. We appreciate all you do.
Well, thank you.
I got to find out that April date so I can see Mr. McGrory at the dance marathon. Next on our agenda is our employee recognition.
Well, we are here this month to recognize a group and individuals for the work they've done. The unsung heroes of the Muscatine Community School District, in particular this winter, is our maintenance staff. Led by Jeff Miller, this group includes Randy Gertz, Steve Eggers, Jamie Hine, Virgil Bierman, Dylan King, Ed Meinert, Isaac James, Todd Heinck, Steve Preston, and Les Hunter. This staff has been on duty to move snow, de-ice parking lots, fix leaks, and keep the heating systems operating during one of the most prolonged winters in recent memory. When everyone else is home waiting to hear if there's going to be school or not, those folks are out there trying to make it possible. Long days, short nights, cold weather, and mountains of snow have not fazed our maintenance group, and we really appreciate their hard work, their dedication, and commitment to keeping our campuses safe and accessible. It is truly, this winter has been a taxing one on our folks, and we just really appreciate everything they do. And we did have a little bit of a pizza luncheon for them last week, and they can move pizza as well as they move snow. That's what we found out. So.
Well, congratulations and thank you to our maintenance team. It certainly has been a winter on record, I think, if not by numbers of inches of snow, certainly by number of times of plowing, dismissals, etc. So let's hope that might all be behind us now. Moisture only in the form of rain is now what is accepted. So thanks, though, to our maintenance team. The next item on our agenda goes to our board targets and goals, and we list those on our agenda as we list the targets and the goals specifically for the items, so I'm going to read these. Students will graduate prepared for post-secondary options. Muscatine schools will utilize resources effectively and equitably, and students will learn in a positive and supportive environment. So tonight, under those three topics, the first item we have is a discussion of a possible curriculum audit. And Jerry, I believe you're going to share some information with us.
Yeah, we had a special board meeting a few weeks ago that had a presentation from Curriculum Management Solutions. And the intent of that was to give the board a sense of what service they could bring in evaluating our system. You know, as we look back on some of the challenges we've have and addressed, we certainly have not cracked the code on improving student achievement to the level that we would like to see. Some of that has to do with our demographics, and Mr. McGrory is going to share some of that in a bit. We know that from the Great School Study that schools that have more affluent or in more affluent areas tend to have higher achieving students, partly because of the experiences and opportunities that those kids may have that kids in less affluent systems may not be able to acquire. We also are struggling, and again, Mr. McGrory is going to talk about this also. We still struggle with some other issues. Attendance is one we still are really battling. You know, historically, attendance was kind of fell on as a responsibility of families to have kids get to school. And over the last few years, that responsibility has really gone to schools to make sure that happens. And we are still really struggling with making sure that kids are here every day, all day. We also still struggle with a dropout rate that is, for decades and decades, has been way too high. So we know we still have some of those issues before us. Now, it's not like we haven't been doing things. We've kind of addressed things that would be typical responses. We increased our rigor in our school with our AP work, our ACT testing, our curriculum unification. We've added career focus with the academies and our work with MCC. We've made sure that our interest areas, fine arts, PE, are being addressed and brought and kept up to speed. And we've been, I think, really doing a good job of making sure our resources are kept in line with our size. We've reduced our physical plant. We're moving the 6th grade back to elementary schools, which again is a response to this issue. We've tried to empower teachers with our district advisory committee, with the work we're doing with MEA. So we've had a number of things happen, and these certainly this isn't an exhaustive list. But what would really be helpful for the district, and this is when I brought this up earlier in the year, I really feel it would be helpful for the board to have a third party come in and take a look at what are we doing that needs to be supercharged, what are the things to be modified, what are some recommendations so that we can get closer to where we want to be with our student learning goals. The curriculum management solutions, they worked in, I think, 47 states. They've worked across internationally. They've had a long association with Phi Delta Kappa. This is what they do. They have a strong model for evaluation, and they also have a very strong history of giving definitive feedback for districts to work on for improvement. This report would be the board's, and I think the proposal that they sent was addressed to me, but that's only because I had requested it. This needs to be the board's. The board needs to own it, because it is from that you're going to be making hiring decisions, you're going to be making program evaluation decisions, you're going to be setting goals and strategies for the next 5 years. So I think it's really important that this is a board initiative, because that is one of your primary responsibilities. So this is not on the agenda to vote on tonight, but I thought it would probably be good if the board would want to have some conversation about that, what they would like to, if they have any questions for CMSI, and then it could be brought to the board for a vote in April, or whenever the board would like.
And this company, outside of providing the audit, was when we met, we had a lunch meeting, they were very clear they don't sell anything additional.
Right.
Which
They're not, as a matter of fact, they said they would not come back for 5 years. So what they do, some firms will come in and they'll give you a report and they'll say, we can provide additional work. We can do additional advising on this for a fee. That's not their model. They come in, they give you their assessment of your district curriculum and quality control, and then leave the district to move forward.
And the board was sent a couple of examples. I know that was another question that we had when we all looked at this, is a couple of examples of some things they have done. And I think the first one was 278 pages of light reading. Yeah.
They are a very detail oriented. They're also very structured, very process driven. They have specific protocols. It's a solid study. And that's, they take about 4 months to complete it. So it's not something that they come in a week and they've got it complete. So, but I think this is something that would be valuable. That this is a board initiative, and really driven by the board.
Hey Jerry, this is Aaron.
Yes. I started looking around the table, Aaron, then I remembered you're on the phone.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
How do we go about then as a board engaging? Is that one of us, working with them on a contract? How does the board, become the entity that's doing the engagement?
Well, the technical side is the board is always the contract agent in any contract that we do. So the actual becoming the contracted agent there, that kind of just goes with the territory. You could do the other side. Probably the more important side is, so how do you engage them in a conversation to get this thing all rolling. And you could do it a couple of ways. You could meet a board as a whole and meet with CMSI and have those conversations, or you could have a board subcommittee. And that would be really entirely up to the board to how they would like that to work.
Do we need to have that figured out by April when we approve, or is that something we can work on after we approve moving forward?
Yeah, it wouldn't have to be decided before April. Basically, in April, what the board would be doing is saying that the board wants to pursue a contracted service with these folks, and that the board would sign off on the contract.
Okay, thanks.
Well, excuse me. Well, I think the way I look at it as, this whole process should be looked at it as a positive addition to what we are doing in taking our district or moving our district forward. I think, yes, the board's involvement becomes very crucial and very important and vital in designing maybe or participating in making those decisions. So yeah, I'm with Aaron also on this point that it's important for us to, once it's approved, to perhaps come up with some sort of mechanism. So how we're going to move forward with that. But I want to also keep something in mind that in doing what we are planning to do as a board, that doesn't mean that we are not on the right track as a district. Doesn't mean that our students, our teachers, the administration, and so on, are not doing the good work that they are seeing them doing on a daily basis, keeping the students as number one in whatever they are doing. I just want to make sure that this point is very clear also to everybody too.
Well, and I think we have a lot of people working really hard. What something like this does is gives us the opportunity to work smarter.
Yes.
And I think having the again a third eye, an independent body come in and take a look at it. Whenever you're working closely on something, you develop some tunnel vision. You develop a different vision of how things are going. This would really give the board a sense of, okay, here are some things I think that need to happen in order for us to turn the corner. And these are the kinds of things that are not easy fixes. These are not things when that's why they say they won't come back for 5 years, because it takes time to make significant changes like that. The only people that identify simple fixes typically have the wrong fix, because if it was simple, somebody would have probably thought of it. So this is going to be, and I can tell you there will be things that they'll look at, and we'll have policy gaps that will need to be addressed. There's going to be gaps, I'm sure, that in instruction. There's going to be gaps in curriculum delivery. There's going to be, because we know that's always the case in every system. They will help us see where are those and where are the most dramatic gaps, and what is lacking in our system to get us where we want to get to. And this type of thing is, I agree, it is completely positive, because it's positive from the standpoint of you have a district that wants to get better. It's not saying, oh, we're good enough. It's not saying, well, that's just the way we are. We're not saying, that there's, it's beyond us. I think anytime you do something like this, it really shows a lot of confidence that a district has in its staff, its teachers, its community, because there's a belief we can get better. If you didn't have that belief, you didn't have that hope, there would be no point in doing this.
So, my feeling is that at some point, just the feeling of the board, I think most of us are very supportive of this, and so that I would like the board to automatically start thinking about when we get the final audit back, that we have a procedure in place for that information to be disseminated to the public. And it's my belief that the best person to do that would be our superintendent, so that the board would authorize the superintendent to be the person to disseminate that information via during a meeting here, or whether we have, in essence, quote, a public meeting to let the public know what's going on, because I think that way we best get the public best gets what's going on, and they will then understand why we did it and what we're going to do with it, and how it's going to improve the school district.
And I appreciate the thought. I would also recommend, though, that we set up a time that the people that did the audit present the audit. Because I think that's the other thing that that adds some, I guess, for lack of a better word, credibility. These are the folks that this is what they looked at, this is what they saw, this is why they are recommending what they recommended. And I think coming right from that source rather than interpretation through me would really serve the district better. And I think those are things, and they provide that service. And so I think there will be, the follow-up on this is also going to be critical, is after we get this information, what are you going to do with it? How will the district, how will the board, how will staff move forward to implement those? What kind of timetable? What's the evaluation model for those things? All those things will also have to be worked out. But I really feel confident that these folks will give us recommendations that will be of merit, and we won't just be whistling down an alley, that these will be things that will help move us. Are there any questions that the board would have that you would like me to go back to CMSI and make sure that they have that information for you for the next? Because if you have some questions, I can have them respond directly to the board as well.
Perhaps, and I think it's going to be very difficult, but I would like them to use their expertise in helping us understand perhaps the mental health needs that the school district is able to provide, and those that which they would like to see perhaps us strengthening. Even I know mental health is one of those areas that you could probably have 100,000 different people come in and tell you 100 different things that we need to do. But I think from my perspective, a lot of when students do not achieve well, there could be issues that are home life and mental health issues that we need to be aware of, so that we can have in place plans that help them achieve to the best of their abilities.
I can ask that question. I shouldn't speak for them, but I guess I'm going to probably anyway. Their protocol is very standardized because they use a very research-based model for their audit. So I don't know where that would fit in, but I will see how that, if it fits in. Their primary driver is kids learning and what's keeping kids from learning, and what in the system is keeping kids from learning at their potential. Now, the things like mental health and some of those things, my guess will come up particularly in some of the focus group things and some of those kind of how they respond to those things. But I will pass that question on.
Well, I just remember when we had the special meeting, a question was in that area. Yeah. And I forget what her name was, I'm sorry. indicated that she was surprised that we didn't take it further and talk about the social and economic problems facing a community and their aspects on learning. And so that's why I just kind of moved that direction.
It's a valid question, and I will make sure that they get an answer to the board on that.
And I think, Jerry, if I may add one more point here, even though we strive to be the best district for our student, but also I would like to see, if possible, where we stand statistically from those, what they classify as best districts, and where we stand in relation to districts that shares the same characteristics that we have as a school district. So in order for us to make that kind of comparison and find out what we need to do also to move forward with that, if possible.
You know, that is, that's one of the things I think Great Schools does really great, is that they really have found there really hasn't been many places that have cracked that code. You know, the two examples they gave here in Iowa were both schools that had standalone second high schools. So their primary high school, their data looked much better. Their standalone high school didn't. So you had one that had a graduation rate of, I don't know, 93 or something, and I think their standalone had was 15%. So that's one of the things that, as we look at some of those responses, and we certainly would like to look at some high school options for kids, we will never want to go down the road of creating a high school that is a dumping ground or a road to nowhere. Kids deserve better than that, and numbers are important, kids are more important, and making sure kids are ready to do what they can and want to do after school is important. So, I can tell you that we're not unlike a lot of schools with our demographic. I still think we could be substantially better because we've put some things in place that I think could really help us. But we need the next step of how do we really change that trajectory, because the community is really depending on us.
Just a quick glance at their information, and since our audience members don't have this, it looks like they've done work in about 16 to 17 different states, and I'm looking at school populations of as small as 670 students and as large as 150,000. So also just thinking about the variety that they have also seen, I think they will, I think they have some great experience in what they will bring to us as well. So I feel good about that.
Yeah, they're kind of the gold standard for this kind of work, and there aren't that many people doing this kind of work either. But it is, the model they use has been, like I said, used in 47 states. It's solid. And you're right. The report will not be easy reading, and for both to get through and maybe to take, but it will be important reading if we're going to get over the hump.
Any other comments or questions from anyone? All right, we'll move on to our next item, which is a middle school naming process. And Mike, I think you're going to take us through this item.
Thank you, President Thaw. The board may remember at one of previous board meetings, the board indicated, I was going to say the band indicated, the board indicated that when we go to one middle school in 2020-21, that it would make sense to rename West Middle School. So this evening, we've kind of come up with a draft of a process the board could utilize to rename the middle school. You've got a hard copy in front of you of the draft, and then also we're going to project it on the screen for our community. The proposal begins by first forming a committee, which is one of the requirements of our board policy, is the form a committee whenever you're looking at naming a new building. And looking at some other schools, the composition of the committees, I kind of took some of their thoughts. I'm recommending that we may look at 2 board members. We have 2 middle school administrators and also 2 middle school teachers. And then we would have up to 4 community members on the committee. So once the committee's formed, the next step would be for the community to then have the opportunity to start coming up with suggestions for names of the new middle school. So once the committee's formed, we would probably have suggestions where it would be open for community members to make for 3 to 4 months. And I'll show you in a few minutes what that might look like. And then after that, the committee would probably close the process, and then they would look at it and ultimately make a recommendation to the superintendent, and then the superintendent would make a recommendation to the board for approval of the new middle school name. One of the things we've talked about at the district level is it might make sense to shoot for a date of coming up with that name maybe by the end of this July, because it might be a nice way of, at the beginning of the year, sharing it out with our whole staff in our district, and then also giving us time to rebrand the building to get ready for that 2020-21 school year. One question I think I haven't covered that's on here too is what would be the criteria that the committee would use to determine the name of the school. And you can see on your form here, and it's also up there, is basically 4 criteria where the school district buildings would be named after persons who have attained international, national, state, or local prominence, or after persons who have made a significant contribution to the district, or after the geographic characteristics of the area in which the facility is located. Number 2, when possible, the name shall be known to and significant to the people of the district. And then 3rd, the name shall not conflict with the names of other schools in the district or surrounding districts. And then 4, the use of names of living persons or persons whose death occurred within 5 years of the selection shall be avoided. That seemed to be a common criteria for a lot of schools that were naming buildings. So that could be a criteria that the board decides to use. If you look on the second page there, what community members would be able to do is they'd be able to go to a link, hit on that link, and then what would come up would be, again, kind of the reason of renaming the building, and then the criteria, and then they would be able to put in their name, their email address, suggest a name, and then the reasons why that name. And so they would do that, and then they would just submit it, and then the committee at a meeting would look at all the different recommendations, and kind of go from there. So it's a draft of a process that we could use, and I wanted to see if the board had any questions about the process or thoughts of, what you might like to change about the process.
Seems like sensible guidelines.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. Anything missing, you board members feels missing, or? And does the timeline make sense to the board? Okay. Okay.
I think keeping it simple like that would be much easier to deal with later on, so I don't have any addition to that.
Okay. If there aren't any other questions, would any board members be interested maybe in volunteering? I certainly don't want to put anybody on the spot, but
I would
we
love
have you
to.
here this evening.
I would love to if you're looking
Okay.
for volunteers.
That's great. Thank you, Tammy.
So this would be for the beginning of the
2020.
2021 season?
Yes, it would
Okay.
be, Randy. Yep. Anybody else? John?
I would like to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Great. John, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, if not, we're going to move towards, move to kind of a district data presentation. Joining me tonight is Joelle McConaughey, principal of McKinley School. If you want to wave, Joelle. And also Stephanie Zillig from Madison's principal. Thank you, Stephanie, for waving. School board members, you should have a hard copy of all this data as well, and then we'll have it projected for our community as well. The data tonight will focus on district demographics, kind of Jerry talked a little bit about that. District attendance data are also our fast reading data. And then finally, our school improvement efforts at McKinley as well as Madison. What we'd like to do for the board is try to, at each board meeting, is have maybe some of our buildings share out their school improvement data. So you're up abreast of what's going on in each school. So I'm going to begin the presentation by kind of reviewing some of our district demographics. That would be this chart right here that says district demographics. I don't mean to make it too simplistic, but I know the font's a little bit small, but it has a lot of information on there. It ranges from each building, a breakdown of each building, total number of students, their diversity, female, male, but also, I think you might find interesting, it also has special ed numbers for each building, your ELL numbers for each building, free and reduced numbers, and then gifted and talented numbers for each building. And then if you look all the way down, it has the overall district projections in each of those areas. And so the chart, I thought it might be handy for board members, you know, this might be something you want to keep because it really does have a nice breakdown of each building. But when you look at the chart, some of the things I'll kind of draw your attention to is when you look at the district diversity, I think a lot of people would say maybe we're not as diverse of a school district as maybe some would imagine. And the reason for that is we're about a little over 28% Hispanic and then a little over 62% Caucasian. So over 90% of our students are either Hispanic or Caucasian. The rest of the 10% of our student population is made up of African Americans, Native Americans, also Pacific Islanders and multiracial, and then Asians. So with that, when you start breaking it down even more, out of the 28% of our Hispanic students, we have a very small population that are English learners, language learners. So it's at about 6.6%. So what one could probably present from there is that really we have very few of our Hispanic students are probably first generation Hispanic students. Then if you go on to looking at our free and reduced numbers, we only have one school, elementary school in our district that is not a title school. To become a title school, you have to have at least 40 or higher percent of free and reduced numbers. So the one school that is not elementary a title school is Mulberry. They're at 33% free and reduced numbers. Our free and reduced numbers range as a district from 33% all the way up to 85%, which would be Franklin Elementary. One thing I'd kind of caution probably the board, free and reduced numbers can get very misleading. And the reason, particularly at the secondary level, is that a lot of times students stop putting in for free and reduced. Typically at the high school, you start seeing a drop because students may get jobs or, you know, a variety of things where they don't put in for free and reduced. So even though these are telling you what the free and reduced numbers are, I would probably tell the board that they're probably higher than what these are saying. Also, when you look at, I think some other interesting demographics is our special ed. Our district special ed numbers are about 12%. And you might ask, where does that put us comparatively to other districts? It probably puts us somewhat on the lower end. Some people might think we have a high special ed population, but really it's either probably right in the range of most schools or actually on the lower end for most schools. So I know it has a lot of other demographic data feel free to look at your leisure. But if there's any, I'd be glad to entertain any questions that you might have about the demographic data right now, if the board has any.
Mike, can you tell me a little bit about how we get our GT numbers? What the qualification is for that?
Sure. And I'll tell you some of the work that we've been doing in GT as well, is that the numbers are oftentimes determined on how students perform on standardized testing, but it also is, a piece of it is teacher recommendation as well. As a district, we have really tried to, and that's why when you look at our gifted and talented numbers, one thing I'm really proud of is that our numbers are pretty consistent across all of our buildings, and pretty close across all of our buildings. One of the things we've really tried to emphasize, and the state wants us to emphasize, is getting students into the gifted and talented program at the lower grade levels. So starting in first grade, getting kids in gifted and talented. So we've done a better job of that. The other thing we've really tried to emphasize with our gifted and talented population is making it more diverse. Whether that's by race or by free and reduced, we've really made an effort to become much more diverse, and our numbers reflect that. Does that answer your question, Tammy?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? I know it's a lot of data information, so. Okay, if not, I'll go on to some attendance information. Basically, as the board knows, for the last 3 years, we've really focused on doing a couple things with attendance, trying to improve attendance and trying to reduce our chronically absentee rate as a district. The district attendance data you have in front of you will provide you kind of an overview of how we've been doing as far as our improvement efforts. Each building has an attendance team that looks at their data daily. And in a few minutes, I'm going to turn it over to Joelle and Stephanie to talk about some of their efforts in their buildings. But I can tell you, you have a lot of people working really hard to reduce our attendance, or increase our attendance, but reduce our chronic absenteeism. Kind of like Jerry said, is that it really has to be a community effort. It can't just be the school. And because of that, we've had a lot of support from our community. There's an organization that has given us a lot of support in our community to help with attendance. But as you look at the attendance data, some of our goals within that have been obviously to reduce the chronic absenteeism, but particularly, this might surprise the board, is in kindergarten is one of our highest chronically absentee grades that we have. And you wouldn't think that. You would think most kids in kindergarten want to come to school. That would not be a problem, but that is one of our highest. That isn't atypical for districts. And also one of the things we really focus on is those transition grades. We want the chronic absentee numbers to go down, say in 5th grade going into middle school, 8th grade going into high school. Because we know in 8th grade, if those numbers are really high, their chances of success at the high school go down. So we have really focused on that. The charts you have, the data you have in front of you, basically will provide you, the first one here, provides you a nice overview of the last 3 years of our work and what each school has done as far as their chronic absentee rate. So you can look at, let's take for example, well, and also if you want to look on the back, so it has all the schools on there. But let's take Central Middle School, it's on the back there. One of the things I want to point out with Central Middle School is that 2 years ago they finished at 11.4% chronic absenteeism, which is 64 students. Last year they finished with 17.1%. And one of the things we asked our middle schools to do is really look, like I said, at that 8th grade level. That 8th grade level was over 20% chronic absentee rate at both middle schools. And I have to applaud Central Middle School's efforts. This year in March, as of March right now, they're at 12.4%. So they've seen a really nice decrease there. Unfortunately, at West Middle School, you can see that we're still hovering around that 20% 0.5%. One of the things at our high school that we really need to continue to work on and concerns us a great deal is just our overall chronic absentee rate. Right now in March, we're at 29% chronically absent. What tends to happen with chronically absent students is it tends to go up as the year progresses. So it's unlikely to go down much, but it's more likely to go up. And so we're probably projecting that the high school will be, well over 30%, have 30% chronically absent students.
Mike, how many days
Yep,
qualifies
yep.
for the chronically?
To be chronically absent, you have to have 18 or more days in a school year. So basically 10% of your school year you have to miss. And what all the studies show is if you are chronically absent, you miss more than 10%, it significantly impacts how you do in school. And a lot of people are surprised when I tell them that at the lower elementary level, you can start projecting who are going to be your dropouts. Because a lot of our students at the kindergarten level, to first grade, they're already about 2 years behind in skills, and they're chronically absent in kindergarten, and then they're chronically absent in first grade. So that critical year in third grade, by the time they get there, if they're in that situation, they're probably going to really struggle, and then they'll continue to struggle. One of the things we're excited about with our preschool, our new preschool, is I really think that's going to make a big difference. We're going to have a lot more students kindergarten ready. And that's going to help our chronically absent numbers. It's going to help our kindergarten chronically absent numbers as well. So I think that's going to be really exciting when that starts this fall. The other chart tells you about what each grade level, the breakdown for each grade level. So you, as a board, when you have a chance, you can look at that, and it shows you each school and then each grade level breakdown. One of the interesting things that we've been tracking is that Colorado, as many board members may know, is they kind of had a unique experiment at the fourth grade level where they combined both fourth grade sections, and then they also pushed in their special ed teacher as well as gifted and talented as well as EL. And they have seen a significant decrease in their chronic absentee rates. So I think we're constantly looking at the different things our schools are doing and sharing that out. We meet once a month as a district to talk about what's going well and what's not going well. Because in order to improve your attendance, you have to be on top of it every day. And so I applaud what our buildings are doing. Sometimes I'm just amazed at how much they do. And I'll kind of turn it over to Joelle and Stephanie to amaze you even more.
I'd like to ask a question on the previous one. One of the things I noticed as I looked specifically, because you mentioned Central's attendance versus West attendance. The information, as I look at it, it appears as though there's an increase monthly in the chronic absenteeism at West. Are those based on a static number of students all the way across, or has some of that been attributed to students moving in or being shuffled from Central to West?
Yeah, that's a really good
question. Because I think I'm sorry, it upset. To say that Central is doing a wonderful job implies that West is not doing a good job. But so that's why I think we need to look closer to what the information, the numbers are. Was the change due to new students coming in that were already chronically absentee from previous areas? Are students being moved? Because I did do some things at Central, and I constantly heard some of the students say, oh, well, they went to West now. They went to West now. They went. But you very seldom heard those students say, oh, they came from West to us. So those were the students at 8th grade talking. So have we broken it down into those numbers? That
we do look at that. As a district, we probably, one of the most important things you look at as far as transition into our district is what is that transition? What % of your students come in and out? And Last time I looked at it, it was probably at 12%. So 12% of our student population come in and out. That's a very manageable number. A lot of districts, particularly if you have a lot of at-risk students, can get up to 30 to 35%, and then that really starts impacting your data. But you're right, Randy. We have a lot of students that go back and forth between West and Central. That could have a small impact, but probably. I know if I asked each of the middle school principals, they would each argue that they get as many as they give up as far as students. So I don't think they think there's a big discrepancy. I think the principals would say to a T, both our middle school principals, is that they're working really hard. But probably the difference right now is Central has more daily things in place to work on absenteeism, and West has been working with them to actually adopt some of those. So they just probably have more processes in place right now, and I think that's part of why you're seeing a little more growth there.
And both buildings, the administration at both buildings are working with students in attendance areas?
Yeah, absolutely. They meet on a regular basis. They review students' attendance. Then they make home visits. We have a lot of principals doing that. They do a lot of motivational things to motivate students. They do a lot of recognition of students to motivate them to improve their attendance as well. So our principals are, and you'll hear from two principals here shortly, they're heavily involved in the attendance process. The one thing we caution our principals is that they probably don't have the time to lead it. So you have to develop, if you're going to have a quality attendance program, you have to develop that leadership within your building, because if the principal's always leading it, they probably don't have the time to every day lead it. So,
thank you.
Yep.
And I don't want to, I know that Joel and Stephanie are ready to start, but I noticed I was looking at this piece of paper with the data, and it's really very interesting data, because when you look at right now, 5th grade into 6th grade, obviously they are moving to middle school.
Yes.
Look at the number of students not attending, and I think bringing 6th grade back into elementary buildings going to make a huge difference on our data after that, because this is apparent that it's a big change for little kids. So hopefully this will help us a lot.
I think that's a great point, John, because I think we all believe the social emotional impact of this change will help dramatically with the attendance rates at those levels too. Yep.
How much do if you had a crystal ball, how much do you feel that this winter's weather has driven attendance? I mean, my first thought was it'd be interesting to see month by month, year over year. However, those aren't cohort groups, right? It's a new group of students, but I can't help but wonder, I mean, we went for how many weeks where we didn't get a full week of school in due to the weather, and I'm guessing that you may... We always say it's parents' decision, right? The guardian's decision to send the student. And if I've missed 4 days of school and there's only 1 day left, does it really hurt me to miss? Yes, it does. That was a rhetorical question. It doesn't hurt, but does it hurt me to miss one more day? And I'm guessing that when I look at these December, January, February numbers, the weather would impact this to some degree.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. I think one of the things you look at is, which might surprise people, is that when we have a late start or early out, that's when some of our attendance numbers are the worst. You would think a late start, kids would get to school on a more regular basis even, but it's the exact opposite. So those late starts, early outs do impact our attendance. Certainly sickness, if there's a lot of that going around, affect it. What we talk a lot about is that if you're focusing on a couple students, that's not going to, change dramatically your data. So really focusing on your whole group, particularly students that are right on that bubble, that you can get where they aren't chronically absent. If you really focus on, and that's your largest group usually, that you have that are verging on chronically absent. If you really focus on that group, you can make a big difference as far as lowering your numbers. The most difficult group to move is what we call our level 3 chronically absent kids. And those are the kids that have extreme numbers absentee rate. There's a lot of reasons why they're not coming to school, whether it's mental health, transportation, or whatever. That's a group that's really hard to move because you have to put a lot of resources towards trying to improve their attendance.
And while understandable, they
Yeah.
still need to be, I mean, it's the consistency that becomes important, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
missing 10% of your year, and if you already have some other struggles, is tough at
Yep.
best.
Another statistic, if a student misses 10% of the year, they lose a year of learning. So, I mean, it puts them a year behind on average. So it has a huge impact on their learning.
Every missed day is compounded because you're catching up and you didn't quite get the instruction that day. And then when you take kids that miss 18, 20, 25 days a year for 10 years,
Yeah.
they are really in a hopeless spot.
Hey, Mike, this is
Yeah.
Aaron. I had one question.
Sure, Aaron.
How does our high school rate for me seems, at 30%, that's more than a class that's chronically absent, but how does that compare to other high schools that have, similar communities or demographics?
That's a good question, Aaron. I guess I can give you a little historical data on it. 3 years ago, we were at 16.2%. And now we're verging on 30%. So we know we can reduce the chronic absent number based on that history, just in our district. I would say our numbers at the high school are, probably significantly higher than a lot of high schools. What I don't know is what you're, I think, asking is our demographics comparatively to other schools with similar demographics. How does that compare? I can certainly look into that, but I would hate to tell you the wrong thing on that.
No, that's fine. I think it'd be good to understand a few districts that are similar to ours, whether it's size or demographics.
Sure.
And then use them as benchmarks for some of this. I think the fact that you just said we were at 16 and we're at 30 within, 3 or 4 years or whatever you said is fairly alarming, in terms of doubling. But I'd also like to understand what are trends in districts that are similar to ours, and are they seeing the same thing, or is this something unique to us? And, how do we go about solving it?
Well, I think the other thing, too, is the 16% was a high water mark. We probably traditionally has been closer to the 25 and 30%
Yeah.
than the 16 over decades.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, I think it'd be good to compare to some other districts of similar, like I said, size or makeup or whatever.
Yep, I can do that, Aaron. I'll get that together and send it out to the board.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Yep, you bet. Any other questions from the board?
How do you isolate or divine the causes? Because I imagine in order to address this issue, you want to attack the root cause of the problem, and I imagine there's various causes, and perhaps they line up along demographic lines, perhaps they don't. How do you find that out?
Yeah, I think that's why this work is so difficult, is almost every student to a T, there's a different reason why they're missing school. So if you could really, it would be much easier work if, I think you're asking, Nathan, like if you had the criteria, what causes a student to be absent, and then you attack that. But every student, it's something different. It's maybe, some students are maybe working, some students are taking care of other children, some students mental illness, and it just goes on and on. And so I wish I could tell you that, one or two things, and I don't know if the principals would agree with that, or if there's anything you'd want to add to that.
Well, I'm not asking so much what the things are, but how do we figure out what they are?
Right. I think our tact on it has been we have provided so many more mental health resources and so many other resources to our families, ranging from transportation to a lot of our students struggle with day-to-day survival as far as housing, food, those type of things. We started a program this year. It's an amazing program where every 2 weeks, once a month, I should say, families can get up to 2 weeks worth of food. Those type of things have a huge impact because all those things prevent our students sometimes from making it.
And my guess is our principals will talk a little bit about this, but it's often a family issue. And so sometimes it's not so much, we may not be able to fix the problem, but can we find a way for the kid to cope with this so they can still get to school? Because staying home doesn't solve the problem.
Right.
Are we, from the attendance numbers, are we able to understand, and I'll use an example of it, CMS, so of the 12.4% or the 75 students, are we able to identify what the free and reduced lunch percentage is of those students, or to see a little bit more about?
Yeah, yeah.
I would sense.
It typically is a fairly high correlation.
Yep.
Not always, but tends to be.
And we have looked at that as far as, students that are on our list, and then if they're free and reduced, and there's a high correlation
Right.
oftentimes.
Well, and I think to Nathan's point, if I have food insecurities or I don't have a place to live that's warm, going to school is probably the least of my concerns, right?
Right.
Understandably so, but.
Yep. Yeah. That's why it really takes the whole community. This is a community effort. Any other questions?
Sorry,
No.
well, I see that from an elementary school perspective. It feels like our percentage is almost double as they get older. And I know that's probably because they have more control, they can drive themselves or whatever that might be, but it looks like as they get older, they have a significantly higher rate of absenteeism.
Yeah, I think in a general sense that's true, Aaron. I think the one that is kind of mystifies you is your kindergarten numbers. You would not think they would have as high of absentee rate based on what you're saying, but when you look at our percents this year at each school, the kindergarten numbers, we're projecting we are going to go down fairly significant in our chronic absentee rate at kindergarten. But in a general sense, I think you're right, Aaron. Our numbers would show that as they go through, it starts going up that 5th, 6th grade, and then it starts significantly at that 8th grade, and then at the high school level, it even goes up more. Any other questions? If not, I'll let Joelle and Stephanie share out they are doing some amazing work with attendance. I credit both their buildings, and like I said, almost all of our buildings are seeing real progress, but it's really hard work, and they'll share out some of the things they're doing.
All right, well, thank you for letting us come tonight and share. I think you were asking a lot of really good questions, and attendance is very complex. I know that in each of our elementary buildings, we have systems put in place, and I'll kind of just talk briefly about McKinley. We meet every week in what's called a student support team, and on that student support team are coaches, the principal, the counselor. Sometimes we have our family resource navigator there. We have teachers, coaches, and each week we look at every single student's attendance in our building, and we are looking to see if there's a pattern starting. We also start to look at those students who are improving attendance. So we look really at every single student's attendance in our building. From that standpoint, some of the questions you were asking, like, well, how do you know what the issue is? So that team of people then kind of divide up students, and we call families, because one of the things that we know are that relationships and play a really critical role in attendance. And so we reach out to all of our families and see first if there's any kind of need that they have, because we always address attendance first from a supportive role. Sometimes families aren't even aware of things that we can do to help them or support them. And if we can't in the school, we want to make sure that we find people who can. So I think that's the first approach we take to attendance. So weekly we look at that. We also have a team of teachers at McKinley, along with some students that serve on an attendance team. That group of people look at our overall attendance structure in our school and how we can motivate and excite kids about coming to school. And some of the things that they come up with, we have a big attendance wall where each day the class room gets points. Teachers set goals in their classroom. We have a drawing each month for a family to win groceries, where they can win $100 worth of groceries. That's been very popular. We have monthly incentives. So we do all kinds of things to address attendance. Beyond that, the student support team then starts looking at those families that may be struggling a little bit with getting kids to school. Again, those reasons vary all over the place. So we work always to address those, follow up with our families. Sometimes we pick kids up for school. Sometimes it's helping kids get out of the car to come to school. For parents, it's, whatever they need for that support. So those are just some of the things that we're doing at McKinley. I wanted to highlight just a couple of things. We've decreased our chronically absent students in grades K-5. Last year we had 206 students. Currently we have 167 students. Obviously, we want 0 students on that number, but we are working towards decreasing that. Last year, I know Mr. McGrory talked about kindergarten being one of the highest chronic absenteeism. Last year, our kindergarten class had 21% with chronic absenteeism. So this year, during our Muskie Welcome, we just really spent a lot of time talking about attendance, helping parents understand the importance of why their kids need to be at school for their learning. And we've reduced that this year from 21% to 9.4% in kindergarten. So those are just a couple of things that we do at McKinley.
So at Madison, we do very similar incentives. One of the things that Mr. McGrory alluded to is that it needs to be a tiered approach. So we focus on a variety of tiers. Tier 1 would be those students missing some days of school, Tier 2 missing more, and then those Tier 3 students that are really difficult to move. We know that if we spend the bulk of our time moving those Tier 3 and Tier 2 students that are really difficult to move, we're going to miss out on Tier 1, and we're going to miss out on celebrating those that have good attendance, perfect attendance, those that are here, and we don't want to do that. So that's another piece that we've layered onto support, is really looking at what can we do to support our Tier 1 families. And as Joelle mentioned, a lot of that is just family outreach. Those Muskie visits are so important to connect with parents so that when you're establishing that relationship, you can mention, hey, just reminding you that these are our attendance expectations. Here are some resources that we can provide to you if you need them. We want to partner with you to help your child be successful, and the basis of that is they need to be at school every day. So if you need support, please feel comfortable reaching out. That's one of the things that's been the most successful at Madison is we currently have 0 students on Tier 3. We've worked really hard. Those are a really hard group of kids to move, and we've moved them off. Our Tier 2 numbers are still too high. Right now, I think today we had 24. So for us, we know that that's an area that we want to work on, and then we want to continue to work on that Tier 1 bubble group because we don't want to add any there. We want to decrease that number as we move forward through the spring. And so I would add on to a key component for our success has been the Family Resource Navigator piece and our school counselor. Our school counselor is a critical piece of the connection with families. She recently dressed up as an Uber driver when we had career day because she and myself go and get a lot of students. The other person that I would mention is our school nurses. Our school nurses have been an integral part of that student success team because they'll reach out and connect with families that have medical needs, or they can help address that when are you too sick to come to school? Just a cough, just a cold. These are things that we can help you with. But what we really want is for your student to be here at school. So really what defines being sick? So those have been some other integral pieces of our team.
Stephanie, just kind of by rule of thumb, when you talk about the tiers, how many absences would typically be represented on a tier 1, a tier 2, and a tier 3?
So like 0 to 5, 5 to 10, and then 10% beyond.
And like at McKinley, on your tier 3, what are some of the numbers on tier 3 of the number of days kids have missed?
Well, that varies anywhere from 20 all the way up to 54 days of school.
You know, one last comment, and really appreciate sharing what your buildings are doing. Anybody that says, well, why can't we have it just like it used to be, doesn't understand that we now have teachers, staff members, nurses, counselors, principals are worrying about feeding, clothing, sheltering, transporting, caring for kids, emotional, mental health, and physical care. In a community like ours where we have a lot of kids in need, it is a tougher job. And thank goodness we have people that are willing to do that work.
And I would like to definitely say the same thing. I mean, I hear stories, and one of the stories, I think I never mentioned that before, but some parents mentioned to me that Miss McConney one time went to the school, to their home, and picked up the kid to make sure that the kid is in school. So those are great stories. Maybe not many people knows about that, but that will show what kind of people you are. You are a caring individuals that cares about the success of your students, and those by itself are success stories to me. But I do have one quick question here. And I know we do have a phone line. For example, if my kids are sick and they're not going to school that day, we'll call that line and say, okay, well, Anton, for example, is sick. So out of those people who are not attending or showing up, how many of them will call and how many of them will not call? Any just rough idea?
So, well, so when Mr. McGrory said it's a daily task, it's a daily task. So every single morning, I'm sure both of us, the first thing we do once attendance and lunch count are taken, we pull up our attendance and we go through and look at everybody who's marked NP, which would be not present. So that's parents that didn't call their students in sick. So the very first thing we do is we have, our secretaries, building aides, nurses, our team start contacting those families to find out, is your child sick? Are you able, maybe your car wouldn't start, whatever that may be. And so that's where we start first. And so that usually takes about the first hour, to be honest, of school, is to go through each of those, divide those up, reach out, and then again, I know both of us have our counselors, and we go and pick kids up and help families, because things do happen. Sometimes your car doesn't start, or maybe something happened the night before, or whatever it may be. Sometimes the kids might be having a hard time coming that day, and you find out there might be an issue, so you address that, right away. So again, it's so complex, and there's not really one answer to it. I think it's just, as Stephanie said, it's a lot of reaching out to families, and hopefully, we develop those relationships with families where they also feel comfortable in reaching out to us as well. And many of our families do reach out. So,
thank you.
What, if you were going to guess, what percentage of NP students per day there's not someone calling in on their behalf?
Well, so we have about 420 kids at McKinley, and so I would say it depends. Some days we can be as high as 20, 30 kids that have NPs by their name, sometimes maybe 5. it just depends on the day. I don't know how.
We usually, our school secretary, I'm going to give you today's example. So we started today with 27 on the list. And by an hour through of the school counselor, the school secretary, myself making phone calls, we were able to reach out to families and either find out if they were ill, not present, or needed rides. So we could shrink that down to 11 within an hour. So at least getting some contact with families to know if they're sick, if they didn't move their clock, what was going on. So kind of forgot about that.
And then I'm going to add another layer to that. So on the families that have NP, if we reach out and we can't get a hold of them, then we go and do a home visit. And so then we go to the home and see, have they overslept or things like that. So we spend, the very first hour of school every day, I would say easily is that.
And not just you. But
no. Yeah.
when you think of the human resource being dedicated just to getting kids to school, that's not doing one thing to teach a kid to be a better reader. No. That's not doing anything to help them with their math. It really is a serious issue, and again, I just really applaud the work you guys are doing. And I know sometimes when you go pick those kids up, you're not met with a rose petal parade. And we appreciate
Sometimes
that.
we're not met at all. Nobody will come to the door.
But we do knock on windows. Just saying. So, hi.
It does sound like there's a Uber attendance opportunity here or something, right?
Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead, Aaron.
I had one, yes. And I don't know the rules of this, but are truancy laws still in effect, and can they be applied here for chronically unexcused absences by parents or anything like that?
Well, yes, there is still a truancy law, and I don't want to speak for the county attorney or the county officials. There's simply too many. They have to triage their services. Yeah. We regularly send reports into them, but that they are not a large staff, and felonies and those kind of things take precedence.
Okay. Has that ever worked to increase awareness through the parents or drive better performance if law enforcement does get involved, or is does that not benefit?
Our police department actually will make and do make home visits to homes that are kids that are struggling, and sometimes it makes a difference and sometimes it doesn't. But the police department has been very good about wanting to cooperate. Again, it's certainly a student issue, but it's probably a bigger family parent issue. I've often said when I was a principal, if parents will not have their kids attend school or can't get their kids to attend school, it's really hard for school to get kids to come to school.
Well, and I just wanted to add one thing too. I know at McKinley, a lot of the teachers, one of the things that we haven't talked about is, if kids aren't wanting to come to school, why? So what do we need to do at school, in developing relationships, reaching out to students, making sure that they feel supported. And so, I know those are other things like with the counselor, with our teachers. Our teachers reach out to parents if kids aren't there through, Class Dojo or whatever those things may be. But one of the things that we're always cognizant about is also working on ourselves and making sure, that we are making school a safe and warm environment for kids to come to. So, I do want to address that as well because I think we do work on that relationship piece too.
Any other questions? If not, Stephanie and Joel are going to share out some district fast reading data and then also some of their school improvement efforts. And one of the things I would ask you to look at when they talk about that is, and this is why I have such respect for both of these individuals as educators, they do a fantastic job, is that each of their buildings are about 60% free and reduced, and their standardized test scores, all the way from your standardized test scores, almost any academic barometer that they have in their schools are either very high or at state average. And it's very impressive, the work they're doing in their buildings, so they're going to have an opportunity to share out.
So we're going to start with this first piece, and I know that it is a lot of data tonight, so we're going to summarize some of these pieces for you. But the FAST data, the FAST part stands for the Formative Assessment Systems for Teachers. And this is essentially a benchmark assessment that we give in reading 3 times a year that tells us where we are at. It's like a temperature check for our instruction. Are we meeting the needs of 80% of our kids? Because if we are, then we know our instruction is right where it needs to be, and then we'll support the 20% that we're not meeting. This is the first year that we've been able to add that same benchmark screening for math, which is really exciting. So the sheet that you see right here reports out on the last 4 years of data within our district, and it's just simply reading. So the right-hand column is going to show you how our district has grown throughout 2014, 2015 was the very first year that we administered the FAST assessment, and that came as a result of the Eli law implementation. So that said we needed to temperature check all of the instruction in the state. So you can see that as a district, we've steadily grown in the change column. Last year, our district ended up growing by about 3%. Specifically at Madison and McKinley, I'm going to take a minute to brag a little bit. We saw some really good growth in the 10% range. And I think that's something that we're both really proud of. As a team, we work really well together as an elementary principal team to make those necessary changes when we see that our data comes back, and we make instructional changes based on that. One of the things that we do really well is collaborate together. So if I'm asking a question to Joelle, I see that your data in kindergarten looks great. Can you tell me what's happening there? Can you share that with us? I can send teachers over there to observe what's happening, and she would do the same in my building. So I think that that's one piece that's helped to strengthen our program overall. And that's where we've started to see that really good growth in the area of reading. The other piece that you see is this colored data. This is cohort data from FAST. Again, just simply sticking with reading. But you can really see that consistently seeing that good growth. Specifically in our buildings, I know both of us are pretty competitive, so we're never satisfied with just okay, which I don't think any of our elementary principal team is ever that way. So we are constantly seeking that 80 to 85% good growth. And so that's the cohort data. The last piece that I'm going to share with you, and again, it's really small print. So this is the most current, most relevant piece. This is going to tell you 2018, 2019, including our winter benchmark, which is what we just took. And this specifically has K1 and 2, those targeted areas that we are servicing with our title resources. And you can see the green is where we are meeting our goal of increasing from fall to winter. And that's one of our title program's goals, is to make that good increase. So I'm going to share just a little bit about Madison. If you look at ours, we've seen that we've been able to meet the goal of increasing in kindergarten, in first grade, and in second grade, which is fantastic because we are showing that good growth. In the spring, what we're working towards is what you see on the scorecards. So I know that Joelle and I are both going to show our school improvement plans. That's what we call the scorecard. And that's, again, what we're working for is that 85%. So I'm going to let Joelle share a little bit about hers, because you'll see that she's just a little bit closer to meeting that goal than I am yet.
Okay. So on the scorecard, as Stephanie talked about, one of the things that we are really vigilant about in our building is looking at students' growth. And I always say to my teachers that we owe it to every single student to make sure that they are readers. And so 100% is what, well, I won't let them pick below 90% for a goal, but I want 100%. So as you can see, some of them, we looked at our data coming in, and we started in kindergarten. I'm just going to highlight a few areas. This year, when our kindergartners came in, we had 57% of them reading at benchmark. And at winter, we had 93.5% of them reading at benchmark. In first grade, 81% of them came in reading, and we're at 91. And I'm highlighting a few areas of success. Third grade, we are at 80%. Fourth grade, 70, almost 74%, and fifth grade at 75%. So second grade is an area that we are working on. We did not have, we had 10% growth, which is good, but we made some instructional changes in that area. One of the things that we do is the teachers meet weekly to focus on this in their professional learning communities, and then we also meet every 6 weeks in data teams. The data teams and PLCs include classroom teachers, the EL teacher, the special ed teacher, and the reading teachers, and the instructional coaches. So we have a lot of people really looking at every single student, their growth, and instructional changes that need to be made. The one area that I just want to highlight quickly that I think the teachers would say they're very proud of is the amount of students that we have in college pathway. And if you look at second grade, we have 38% of our kids in college pathway, third grade 44%, fourth grade 49%, and fifth grade 46%. And those are pretty high numbers on FAST to get to that level. So I like to make sure that we're not only meeting students' needs that may be struggling, but we're also meeting the needs of students on the other end as well. So those are the areas that we focus on a lot at McKinley. And, you know, I don't take any credit for these scores. These teachers and staff members are amazing. I have building aides in the room working with kids. We have volunteers. It really takes everyone helping these kids get to where they need to be.
So I'm just going to add a few things. One of the ways that we use this scorecard data is we put it in front of our students, we put it in front of our stakeholders at every PTO meeting. It's on our school website. It is on our Facebook page, and it is poster-sized when you walk into our building, and we keep it updated so that anybody who walks by at any time can engage in a conversation. As Joelle said, our students know what our building goals are. They know that to be a proficient reader, they need to meet our goal. On the flip side, we have our attendance goals. That's also a big piece. We celebrate our attendance so that we can keep that in the forefront of our stakeholders, our parents, our staff. When we meet in our weekly PLC meetings, we're constantly talking about these as SMART goals so that we are always working. Some of the key points that I would highlight too, I alluded to this a little bit, but we added that fast math. We want to make sure that our math instruction is where it needs to be for our students to access that rigorous curriculum when they get to middle school and to high school. So that's one thing that I'm really pleased about this year is being able to not only celebrate reading success, but also to celebrate that math success. You'll see some pieces are missing on this year's scorecard. Those are just simply because we haven't taken them yet, but it also provides a good talking point for our families so they know what's coming next. At a PTO meeting, we can have a conversation with parents about what is an ACT Aspire assessment or what does the new Iowa assessment look like, so that it provides that good conversation. Also, we track data related to family involvement. Joelle and I talked a little bit about the Muskie visits. We want to make sure that we're engaging all of our families. And so a great way for us to do that is track that data about how many Muskie visits we were able to do. Culture and climate data, we want to also include that piece of behavior, office referrals. Where are we at? Madison is a PBIS building. So we're going to celebrate our positive behavior, and that's one of the pieces that I'm most pleased about. Our 2-year trend went from 300 and some office referrals down to 150 last year, and our goal at the end of the year this year is to be under 100, which is a gutsy goal. But we're at 82 as of right now. So I'm pretty pleased that we're on the right track to meet that goal. But I think those are all key pieces for our staff to be able to have conversations about school-wide improvement. They need all of those pieces, and they need that data to be updated as often as possible. And so I think those are one of the big pieces that have influenced the success of both of our buildings, is that we're constantly putting that data in front of our students and in front of staff and in front of families. Does anyone have any questions for us?
I hesitate to ask this because I don't want to rain on anyone's parade, and I don't want to take away from the accomplishments that you guys have made. But I can't help but notice, and I guess it's been almost 8 years now I've been here, our proficiency numbers seem pretty static. You know, a lot of schools are hovering right around, above or below that 55 to 65% range. I hear everything that we're doing. The needle doesn't seem to move. You know, I look at this very detailed sheet you've given us. I see that in 2017, out of 7 buildings and 3 grades tracked, so out of 21 possible results, we met goal 4 times. This year's a little bit better. We met goal 8 times. We're still looking at this year with doubling our improvement, meeting our goals a third of the time. And the goals seem, just looking here, increase 10%, increase 15%, increase. They seem to be set irrespective of what's actually achieved. So at what point do we change the goals? At what point do we say we're just not being realistic? At what point does this improve in a marked, sustained, and permanent way?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to address, I think that a couple of things. I do think that we are making growth in a lot of areas, but again, you know, when working with students and children, there's not one set way to do everything. So if there was just that one set way to do it and it impacted all kids, that would be great. We'd all be doing it. But I think it requires, again, kind of back to the attendance, it's that root cause of instruction, attendance, experiences, language. So all of those things have to be looked at in each of our buildings with each of our classes. So I think, you know, we're always, you know, setting a goal that 80% of our kids are achieving. And, you know, that's a goal that we just are always working towards.
I mean, but that seems to be a goal that we almost never hit in any kind of.
Well, one of the problems we have is that it's almost impossible to make up what kids don't get. And it's why there's no one has cracked the code in high poverty schools.
Well, I understand that, but I feel like there should be a secular trend at some point that shows improvement, and I'm just not seeing it.
In what way, Nathan?
Level of proficiency.
Okay.
Kids achieving at or above benchmark.
But in order for that to occur, kids have had the prior experiences, and the parental support to get there.
Absolutely.
So one of the problems we always have is that we can make quite a bit of progress with kids up through 3rd grade. After 3rd grade, the effects of poverty jumps on their little backs. their vocabulary is limited, their experiences are limited, they have a more difficult time reading for comprehension, they have a more difficult time staying focused on the task because of these other things. Yeah, it'd be great if we had the answer. If we had the answer that everyone was going to have really high quality birth to 3 care, that everybody birth to 3 was going to have the experiences that would enable them to be successful. It'd be great if every child had parents that were supportive, that took care of their physical, emotional needs. It would be great if we didn't have to spend an hour a day just getting them to school. It'd be great if we had all these other kind of things that the schools that are on that top half seem to have.
Sure, and
so I'm not making an excuse for this, but what I'm saying is there are a lot of factors in our community that are going to have to also be changed before we can have the results that we're going to need.
Right, and I don't disagree with any of that. I guess my concern is I feel like we've been dedicating a great deal of effort and resources and energy toward altering that. And the disadvantages of the demography, be that as it may, it seems like the efforts that we're making aren't moving the needle. Right. And so my concern is, what's the point of these efforts? I mean, would we be in the same place?
Well, we would not be in the same place.
Okay.
I think the real question is, yes, we've done some things. There's just more to be done. We're limited by our resources, by our capacity for some of these things. My guess is if we had 2 or 3 additional counselors, therapists, family navigators in each building, we could help some folks.
Well, so let's say we're 5 years down the road, we have this curriculum audit, and we've budged 1% or 2%. What happens? Where's the accountability?
For the community, for the school, but again, I'm not trying to be antagonistic, but the school is a microcosm of the community.
Sure.
We are not apart from the community. We are part of the community. And for decades, this community has had a problem with dropouts, high absence rates, low graduation rates. Why is that? Last year we had a late start snow day, and people were wound up about that we shouldn't have had school. We had 1/3 of our students didn't show up that day. Bettendorf had 10%. There's going to need to be a bigger community effort if we want to see something different in our schools, because we cannot change this alone. It's a myth when people think that good neighborhoods follow good schools follow good neighborhoods. And we cannot do this alone. We cannot work in isolation. We have people working really, really hard, but it is getting so much more difficult. The kids the baggage some of these kids bring to us, it's getting heavier and heavier. It's causing teachers to take a look at that this profession isn't what I signed up for. You get principals that get to a point of, I'm tired of being yelled at by parents when I ask them, would you please get your kids to school? This is a bigger issue, and again, I'm going to go back to anybody that thinks there's a simple solution to this, or if we just had this textbook or that textbook, or if we just tweak this or tweaks that's so errant. This is a problem that is not just in Muscatine, but it's in communities that are like Muscatine. And somehow I still think we can, because I've seen what we have done for some of our kids. But we need more, we need it faster, and we need really a community effort for this to be different.
It seems to me that rather than have to find folks who do great work seemingly bang their heads against the wall in trying to, address this without addressing it, like, wouldn't we be better off as a board focusing our time and energy on how to achieve that community renewal or revitalization or whatever you want to call it, I mean, obviously, all of this is our core mission, and we need to be focused on that. But shouldn't we then, as a board, be focused more on cultivating an environment in the community that enables all of this progress to proceed with greater ease? And how can we do that?
Well, I'm not so sure the board isn't doing that. When you look at the partnerships that this district has with people in the mental health community, with people in different social welfare agencies, with the food banks, with MCSA, I mean, it goes on and on and on. I think this district has worked really hard to be a valuable partner.
You know, one thing I guess, Nathan, what you have is a piece of information or data from Madison and McKinley. I'd be glad to send you like their standardized test data. They've made incredible progress. Here's an example: is that, say, their third grade reading scores on Iowa assessments has gone from like 61% in 2013 to 75%. And I could give you score after score like that in both of these buildings. When McKinley took on well over 100 students, a majority of them free and reduced, their scores not only didn't go down, they went up in their buildings. And so I'd be glad to send that to you, because there's a lot of information you don't have in front of you right now that would probably speak to the progress they're making in the buildings.
And I don't dispute or doubt that we have great people doing great work and making great strides. My concern is that for every piece of information along those lines you could send me, you could also send me 3 where it's going the other way. And so I'm not here to be a downer, and I'm not here to call into question what you guys are doing, because I think it's fantastic. I don't want you to take the wrong thing away from this. But my frustration is that I don't feel like things are changing, and I understand things are getting heavier. I understand, and I'm actively taking part in a lot of the building those partnerships. And I guess maybe it's a more fundamental thing. I guess when I look at our goals that we have on the agenda for every meeting, they're fine goals, but I'm not sure that they capture what our mission really needs to be, which is, you know, more than just rah-rah, we're going to provide good instruction and get good students out there. I think we need to maybe look at those again and reincorporate a community piece and do everything we can so that we shine the light on this need that I completely agree that we have. You know, and I'm struggling to put it into words. I'm struggling, like you say, there's no code to crack. But I'm not satisfied, and I don't think anybody is.
And I would say to that, I mean, you know, I think of like other fields, like a medical field or something where, you know, it's a constant learning field. I think we're in that same field. I mean, we're constantly learning. We're constantly looking, you know, at what instructional practices we have. We're constantly changing based on the needs of kids coming in. And so it's the hard part, I think, about education is because it's always changing, it's difficult sometimes to know exactly what that, you know, answer is. And it's so complex. It really is. And I'm not, you know, all of us, I think, and every teacher, every community member, you know, every board member, you know, has high expectations. We should. And we do, and I think that we're constantly striving to meet those. And we're not satisfied, you know, with what we have. We're always going to keep working for that until every student is proficient or where they need to be. And not just academically, you know, you brought up like looking at our community and that revival. We want to make sure that our students coming to our buildings are also, you know, happy and supported and cared for. That's important too. But, you know, I do think that we have some really great areas of growth, not just, you know, at our 2 schools in our district. We have areas that we need to work on, and I think that, you know, we just have to continue to work together as a community to address that.
Well, I think I would like to say a couple things. The data that we looked at tonight, do we see certain growths In certain areas, yes. Now, what if we don't do anything? Obviously, most probably we will be 20-30% behind where we are at this point. So I think there is no place for just sitting and not doing anything. I don't think we'll be serving our community and basically our students here the best. And I do see that, yes, we are striving to be the best, and yes, we are striving to provide our students with the best. And I see now the audit and working with the CMSI. Now, that can change some of these points and move us forward towards, into, as I mentioned before, into next level. But overall, I think, am I satisfied that we have 10% growth? Most probably, I would like to see 50% growth. But we are moving. Sometimes change does take some time to achieve that, and hopefully everybody working together. As I said, the community needs to be part of that too. All of us needs to be parents, students, everybody, the board, everybody needs to work together in order to move into next level. So thank you.
I would just like to add one thing is, and I know we talked about it earlier in a couple other areas, is maybe it's more even a communication issue such that I agree with Nathan, we're not really seeing long-term trends, but maybe using benchmarks in some other school districts of either similar size and makeup, or even schools that we want to, move towards, we could start comparing our data to their data and get a better story than just the trends of our own data.
And that is very doable.
Well, the other question I have is, we have these goals, and I think they're laudable goals, and it'd be wonderful if we hit them, but does it make sense to set more modest goals and actually achieve more of them? Because, I can say every day, I want to get up today and bench press 500 pounds, and I'm never going to bench press 500 pounds, but maybe I can get incrementally stronger if I apply myself at the gym and work out. It seems to me that it's silly to set the same goal for the same group of kids year in and year out, and then rarely achieve that goal, whereas a more modest and targeted goal might, not only be more realistic, but actually give everybody something to work to. The kids know their achievement goals, you're saying, and if they say, hey, 80%, wow, that's 25 points away, but maybe if we can get up 5%, maybe that's something that the class can pull together and work toward. I may be completely off base, but I wonder about that.
Well, and I'm trying to look at which goal area that you're referring to. So I would say, I'm just going to speak for McKinley, but for example, the reading goals that we set, the teachers set those goals, and the students set their goal areas. And I agree with you that, we don't want to set goals that aren't achievable. But I would say, just looking at our FAST benchmark and, at McKinley, the teachers and students have met all of their goals except for in one grade level. And in that grade level, we've made some adjustments instructionally. In math, our goals aren't as high, if you noticed in our goal setting. And the reason behind that is because it's the first year we've given the test, we set lower goals. We weren't quite sure instructionally, how to address some of those different areas yet. But I do think we make adjustments. I think teachers have buy-in. They set their goals. The students work on goals. So I think that is something that we definitely look at. And I do think that they are achievable.
Okay. So way back when, in the ITBS days, One of the things as teachers we often looked at, and I think maybe Nathan, this would be one of the areas that would help a little bit, is that we looked at, for instance, if you had a class of 21 students and 5 of them were performing at 90% on the Iowa Test of Basic Skills, and you had another 5 who were kind of between 85 and 90. The movement of students from one level to the next, and at that time it was kind of like, what was their grade level improvement? Like, so that if a 4th grader, you know, and I had some of these who were reading at a 2.3 in 3rd grade, when they were done with 4th grade, moved it up to like 3.7. That's a year's growth for that child. And perhaps that, to me, showed some of the movement that you wanted. We couldn't move students, in most cases, 3 to 4 years in 1 year. But there was some growth seen, and which basically said, a job has been done to help this child move up. And that's what we really wanted to kind of continue to see. We used to graph individual students and how they went, and then notice the trends that we're going through. Part of me says, if we could do that, we might see more growth, because some of the students are never going to reach that 80 percentile that we're looking for, but their growth may have moved them from 35 to 50. Right. And I think that would sometimes help us as the board and the community see we are doing a job that needs to be done, that we are improving students. It may not be to that point that every 3rd grader is at 100% proficiency in reading, but there's growth being shown. Those used to be my successes, I'll be honest. You know, every time I just like, oh my God, he went a year and a half.
And if you would come to our buildings during a FAST assessment, you would see exactly that. Every student has a little card. They set a goal on where they are. If a student's reading 3 words, maybe their goal they might set might be to read 12 words or 8 words. So it's not that we say, you know, we go in with each of our kids and say, you all have to have this 8. This is our school plan that we look at overall, but individually we have goals for every student. They have student data notebooks, they track their goals, they set their goals. You know, we have student-led conferences. You know, we celebrate growth, you know, do a lot of celebrating on growth for kids, and that looks different for each child. So.
Well, it seems then for internal measuring purposes, using percentage of students reaching a benchmark is perhaps not the best metric to use. I mean, you could have 100% of kids graduating from high school with a straight D- average, and that would not be a good thing, but you could say, I've got a 100% graduation rate. I mean, this obviously doesn't capture the overall achievement of the students. So would it be possible to present data in a way that shows aggregated growth?
Yeah, I think we could all give that data to you, absolutely. I will tell you why we look at 80% though. If you study the response to intervention, 80% of your kids should be at benchmark to know that you have a healthy core. And so we really use that line to say if we need to make changes in what's happening in core versus tier time for students. So that's why that 80% threshold is there. As administrators, we want to be able to see that percent, because obviously if only 50% of your kids are where they need to be, we can't, you know, do one-on-one plans for 50% of the kids in a building. So we really have to look then at core instruction and making adjustments there. But that's why you see that 80% threshold a lot in our plans, is because of that. And that's very typical across the United States, you know, and if you study the response to intervention, the MTSS, all of that, the research really is clear that you should have 80% of your kids achieving to know you have a healthy core. But to answer your question, yes, we could show that data for growth of students.
That I think would go a long way to showing the progress that I'm hearing about.
Yeah.
Well, I think, Nathan, you know, to answer your question, I mean, for example, I look forward for tomorrow, because tomorrow I would be going to meet with the teachers of my two kids and also with my kids. So they will be sitting down and sharing their plan with me. And I track their numbers. For example, last time I met with them versus this time, so I see the growth in reading, for example, how many words they are reading now versus 3 months ago, in math and in science and so on. And I think the growth, it's hard to say, that all of them gonna be the same way. I mean, I have twin boys and they are growing totally different. One is much better in math and one is much better in English, or reading, I'm sorry. So yes, I think I agree. I go back to a point that Aaron mentioned here. I think we need to find a way to communicate our story with the community in a way so that all these achievements and success stories are shared with the community. Because I think no matter what we try to do here, even with now, for example, bringing the CMSI and conducting the study and coming up with some ways to move the district forward, I think we still need to communicate that with our community in a way so that they know exactly what we are trying to achieve and they become part or partner with us on that. And I agree with all these points, regardless who is mentioning that. I think every point is a valid point, and the communication, I think, piece is very important. It becomes very important.
Any other questions from the board? Yep. Thanks, Joel and Stephanie.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for your patience while we had lots of questions and absorbed data. All right, the next item on our agenda is the consent agenda. The following items are considered to be routine by the Board of Education and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a director so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered in its normal sequence from the agenda. Those items are minutes, employment recommendations, bills and claims, special education contracts, and student teaching agreements. What are the wishes of the board?
I'll move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda as presented. Is there any discussion?
I did have one question. Jerry, I was just wondering if you could touch on the announcement of Stacy before it was approved, and then also, I got quite a bit of feedback last week that there was at least a stated policy that staff could not interview for roles that required degrees until they had the degree. So I didn't know if you could just address that quickly with this or not.
That policy I never have heard of before. That you can't you have to be certified in order to be officially in the job. But no, we hire teachers before they finish their student teaching and that type of thing all the time.
Okay.
The other, when the announcement was made, I think it started out with pending board approval. One of the things that we struggle with, once a candidate's been approached and it's gone through a team, typically the word gets out pretty quickly about it, and often staff, if we don't get something out to them, feel like they're the last ones to know what's going on. And so we always struggle with this. How do we do that prior to a board approval? So we do try to start those out with pending board approval. This will be our recommendation, but it's a little bit of one of those, you get caught between a rock and a hard place. If you don't say anything, you have staff feeling like we're not keeping them to the forefront. And if we say something, or if we don't say, and if we don't say anything, and before the board acts, there seems to be issues. So I'm open to any suggestions of how you'd like that done, because believe me, we've gotten beaten up by staff when they say we didn't hear about it first, and I understand the board's frustration maybe with that also. So I'm open to suggestions.
Well, I think I saw that, and I think the tone of the announcement was, hey, welcome aboard. Glad to have you. I think there's a way to make it clear that this is something is pending approval without making it seem like a fait accompli. And I think it's more of a semantic issue than a structural one.
Okay, duly taken.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those that will to approve the consent agenda as presented, please signify by saying aye.
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 And opposed? And the motion carries. Next on our agenda is to accept and place on file the audit for FY18. And Tom, am I passing that to you?
Sure. Well, tonight we have on the agenda Mia Frommelt from Bonesock and Frommelt, our school district auditors. She's just going to give a short synopsis of FY18 and kind of switch gears here and talk about some finance stuff. But 2017-18 seems like a long time ago, but we just kind of wrapped it up maybe a month and a half or so ago. So there are 4 community members and a board member that's on the audit committee, and Kevin is here tonight, and Tammy also sits on that committee. So I really appreciate them for serving on there to give their insight. And the recommendation came back from the audit committee to approve this, the audit this year for FY18, and so I'll just turn it over to Mia, and she can go through a short PowerPoint. Okay. Thank you for staying. Appreciate your patience.
I'm happy to be here. It was much nicer than the original February day. So
We're not paying you hourly, are we?
No. As Tom mentioned, the audit was well vetted in a draft review session with the audit committee. So I have a summary PowerPoint tonight that each of you should have a hard copy, and then there's an electronic copy. The first slide is do I just push this up and down? All right. So the first slide is the required communications. And, excuse me, this is a reminder that we do 3 audits. We do the financial statement audit, a government auditing standards audit, and a federal single audit. And the good news is that you received unmodified opinions on all of those audits, which is a clean opinion, is kind of what we say in the industry, but the highest level of opinion that you can receive. So that's great news. And as part of those audits, we have several deliverables. We have the financial report, which is the bound document that you may have received. We have a board communication letter and a control deficiency letter. Those letters essentially tell you more in summary about the audit. The control deficiency letter I wasn't going to go into detail on, but that's more like management advice. They're not findings, it's just observations from being out here. One thing before I leave this page, there was a significant new accounting standard this year that was required to be implemented. It's called number 75, and it's over how the districts are required to account for other post-employment benefit liabilities. And so starting on page 36 in the bound document, you will see new footnote disclosures and more information than you ever imagined you could have on other post-employment benefits. It also required a restatement to the financial statements from last year. So the last footnote of that bound document explains that restatement. As a result of that, at the end of 2018, the district reports a liability of $10.8 million for that other post-employment liability. That is something all districts are having, in Iowa, are having to implement. That level of liability is not unusual, and it's actuarially computed by an actuarial valuation. So I think it's such a significant change that I just wanted to make sure that you are aware of that. The next graph shows all funds collectively on more of a commercial type accounting accrual basis. And if you were to combine all your funds on a full accrual basis, the total equity over the last several years would look like this. And so for 2018, the total equity of the district was $35.6 million. But that is broken into three areas. $45 million was invested in capital, which are assets that are not liquid. They're your buildings and your equipment, the desks and so forth. Then $12.8 million is restricted, and restricted is restricted by an outside party. It might be state statute in how it may be spent. It may be by the legislature. It may be by debt. In your case, most of that restriction is with having equity left in your sales tax and your PEPL funds, which are restricted for capital and restricted for future projects. And then unrestricted is the negative $22.2 million, and that is not unusual. That's kind of the leftover portion of the equity. Most districts in Iowa are experiencing these deficits because of the other post-employment benefit liability and because of the IPERS pension accounting requirements. The next slide compares revenues of your governmental funds between fiscal years. So in 2018, you ended the year at $65.1 million in total revenue. And in 2017, it was at $66.4. That's a change of a decrease of about $1.2 million or 1.8%. Property tax assessed value went up 3%, but the rate decreased 4%. So that was a factor in the decrease in revenue between fiscal years. Another large factor was state appropriation foundation aid. That actually decreased approximately $630,000 from the prior year, largely due to your decrease in enrollment. So you went from 4,807 students, or excuse me, fiscal year 18 was 4,807 students on count date. And in fiscal year 17, it was 4,959. So that big change had that financial effect too. Then this slide shows total expenditures for all your governmental funds, and it shows it by function. In fiscal year 18, you had 58.9 million expenditures, and 17 it was 59.1. So you did have a decrease of 0.4%, or about 220,000. That was as expected. Instruction and support services, almost all of that is going to be payroll and benefits for instruction and the support staff around that. And the board had expected this to remain stable by reducing positions or FTEs, but making salary adjustments for those ongoing instructors, and as a result, that change was 0.4%. So right in line with what the change was of your total expenditures. And as I mentioned, we do 3 audits, so that was mostly the information prior was on your financial audit. This summarizes the single audit results. In the government auditing standards audit, we look at your internal controls and we look at state compliance, which is dictated by the state auditor. The internal controls, you do have some significant deficiencies, largely over the foundation, which are repeated. We anticipate that those will go away because of the change in the accounting and processes of the foundation. The significant deficiency over year-end adjustments is just there were year-end adjustments between the CAR and the audit that needed to occur. When they reach a certain level, we need to report those to you. In terms of compliance, the state auditor has no materiality. So if we find one item, we have to report it. So you'll see that in Part 4 in the back of your financial statement. And then for the single audit, which is the audit of your federal programs, Title I was the audit program for this year. I'd like to point out there were no findings, no internal control findings, no compliance over Title I. There were in the year before. So kudos to Title I and finance in resolving those within a year. Federal programs will rotate on their number of years that they've been tested. Since Title I was cleared this year, I am sure nutrition's probably the one that's going to be hit next year. And as I mentioned, there's a control deficiency letter for you to review. There's really nothing too concerning in that letter. Mostly just wanting to make you aware that the federal government continues to make changes to their, what tends to be the nutrition program, but to their procurement requirements. And they're a bit more restrictive than the district's requirements. So just making everyone aware of that, that if you're purchasing non-payroll expenditures in a federal program, there's other protocols to follow. So I am open for questions. I know that was quite a summary.
No questions for Mia?
Great.
Okay.
Thank you
Well, thank you.
much.
It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So the action before us is to accept and place on file
Correct.
the audit for FY 2018.
Correct.
I move to accept and place on file the audit for FY18.
And is there a second? It's been moved and seconded to accept and place on file the audit for FY 18 as presented. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say thank you to Kevin and the audit committee.
Yeah, Kevin, thank you for the extra set of eyes and for giving up your evening to sit with us, and Mia as well. We appreciate that. If there's no other discussion, all those in favor, please motion by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? And the motion carries. And Tom, if anybody wants to look at this, it is on file. They can stop by the board office and...
It will be on the school district website as well as on the state auditor's website in a few days or however long it takes for me to do that tomorrow.
Okay. So. Plenty of places, though, that can be found.
Yes.
Should somebody want to look at it. All right. Moving right along, I think we're going to hang right with you for a little bit. It looks like you're looking for approval for the budget guarantee resolution. Okay, so in your board book, I did put in a recommendation to approve budget guarantee for 2019-20. So you may be asking, well, you just got done explaining at our work session that we will not be on the budget guarantee, and that is true. However, I feel like this is something Muscatine has done several years in a row for reasons that we all know about low SSA, about declining enrollment. So this happens to be next year, one of those years where we won't be on budget guarantee, but I'm reiterating that this is really a safety net. So something could happen, probably unforeseen. We may not think that anything would happen at the legislative level where
you know, I can't even say what I think that would be, but, so I still would recommend that we keep this on file as basically a safety net. Now, if we had 0% SSA, we would be on budget guarantee. I think we had to be just over 2%, which is exactly where we were at, 2.06. So I would recommend that we approve the budget guarantee resolution for 2019-2020.
And there's no harm.
There's no harm
in doing it, and if we
no
don't use it.
To do it, that is correct.
But if we don't have it and we need it,
then we would.
There's harm.
Right, that's true.
So I'll move the motion to approve the budget guarantee resolution for the fiscal year 2019-2020.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the budget guarantee resolution as presented for the 2019-2020 school year. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? And the motion carries.
Thank you. I'll sleep better. So.
And we like that. We like to know you sleep better. And you're on a roll, so I think we
so
just
do
keep going.
The third and final time I will speak. But so in the board packet, again, or in the board book was the publication that will go into the newspaper for our budget hearing that we need to set for the next board meeting on April 8th for 7 p.m. And so in the board book is the actual document that would be put in the paper, and there's really no significant change from our board work session. Property tax rate, again, will be going down by around $1 again for the reasons that we talked about are the SSA amount, the smaller decline in enrollment than prior years, the cash reserve limitation that we have, and so we will be seeing another reduction in our property tax rate overall, as well as our property tax asking, what that calculates out to be. So this is just setting the public hearing. We're not approving the budget tonight, but we're just approving to set the public hearing for Monday, April 8th.
And we are by law required to do X number of days out.
Right.
To set the hearing so we are following our protocol.
We'll publish this and in the appropriate amount of time in order to have the public hearing on the April 8th. Then.
Okay. What are the wishes of the board?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded to approve setting the public hearing for certifying the 2019-2020 budget for 7 p.m. on April 8th. We'll be here at City Hall in council chambers. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 And opposed? And the motion carries.
Thank you.
All right. Our next item is to approve awarding the contract of Fry Builders and Associates for the McKinley Elementary project in the amount of $3,724,800 with a proposed substantial completion date of February 1st, 2020.
Yeah, and I'll let me just. I'm going to give the under the discussion information construction update. Actually, is going to go with this because it so applies. We did hear from the city today that the building code requiring a storm shelter will not need to be in effect for this project. What's really, it's good news for this work in that it did come in under budget than what we had been projecting, $4.5 million. So at 3.7 is really good news. Fry Builders is a local contractor. It's always good when that can be kept in the confines of our community. We and in addition. Moving forward, looking at the Science Wing project, we are going to be working with the city to try and have the building code modified so that any future projects, we don't have to go through the process that we did for with McKinley.
Okay. What are the wishes of the board on this topic?
Well, I would like to move with the awarding contract to Fry Builders and Associate for the McKinley Elementary project in the amount of $3,724,800 with a proposed substantial completion date of February 1st, 2020.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
It has been moved and seconded to approve awarding the contract to Fry Builders for the McKinley Elementary project in the amount of $3,724,800. Again, with a proposed completion date February 1st, 2020. Is there any other discussion? We've worked with some great business partners in the past through our construction, but I am elated that we are able to award this to a hometown contractor. So I'm so pleased by that, so.
And they're very excited to be on the project.
Good. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 And opposed? And the motion carries. Our last action item is to set a public hearing for the Madison Elementary parking lot student drop-off reconfiguration project. And we are looking at the same date as the public hearing for certifying our budget, which is April 8th. It would be here at City Hall. It looks like approximately at 7:10 p.m.
Yes.
Give or take a few minutes. Does anybody have additional information that the board needs on that? It looks pretty self-explanatory.
Just a requirement for the project.
Okay. What are the wishes of the board?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to set the public hearing for the Madison Elementary project, the parking lot student drop-off, for Monday, April 8th, here at City Council at approximately 7:10 p.m. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? And the motion carries. That takes us through all of our action items. We do have a discussion and information item, which is a construction update.
Actually, and that was the update, was that we did get the city, we're coming to closure on that.
Okay. Maybe just for those that, a little background on what we thought we might need to do.
Well, there's a fairly extensive storm shelter requirement built into the International Building Code. And it is actually the International Building Code folks are looking at rewording that because it can almost require a water supply, air filtration supply, flushable toilets, water supply for 20 days. I mean, it's a fairly extensive, it's for a hurricane situation, but it was written in a way that any addition to a school required that. So if you build on any kind of structure to a school, if it would 2 classrooms, you would have to build a fairly elaborate structure for every student in the building, which then makes almost any building on prohibitive. So the State Fire Marshal has they've walked away from that, and it said they're not requiring that, and the city is looking at what they would need to do to possibly change that code, because obviously that would be prohibitive for some of our projects that we're looking at. So
I think that was cause for a little bit of sleep loss maybe this week of thinking about what that additional unexpected
there was a little bit
expenditure
of sleep loss over the last couple of weeks on this.
Could have been.
Yes.
Good. All right. Well, a couple quick announcements then before we adjourn our meeting. So we have parent-teacher conferences March 11th, which I think is today, through March 14th, so the next few days. On March 14th, there will be a 2-hour early dismissal, and I am so excited to say that it's not because of weather. It is a planned early dismissal, so that is March 14th. And then on March 15th, there will be no school. It's a conference comp day for our staff. And then next week, March 18th through March 22nd, will be spring break for our staff and students, which means weather has to be getting nicer because it's spring break. And then that takes us to April 8th, which will be our next school board meeting here at City Hall at 7 p.m. And one other date that was given to us today is the May 4th Race for the Schools date as well. And we'll remind you of that again in April. Does anyone else have anything before we adjourn for the evening? If not, I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
And all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? And the motion carries. Thank you very much.
It's toasty.
Bye, everyone.